Twitch, please. Alright. Not sure why it keeps dropping me, but whatever. Alright. So what's interesting about... I guess I'll maybe have the movie in the background. So what's interesting about the missions is that even though they're this variety of them, the stealth, the recon, the combat, survival, etc., the missions do get appropriately monotonous towards the end. Oh, no! That's gonna play Sanctuary, damn it. Oh, god damn it. What's a really long one? It's just... whatever. I'll just keep going through these. Yeah, Roxas's diary, cool. So the missions, as I said, they get appropriately monotonous towards the end of the game. So the player will begin to fatigue. They will get tired of playing through these missions at the same time that Roxas does. So that's really cool. Is at a certain point in the story, Roxas gets really frustrated working and living in the organization. Because, you know, people aren't telling him stuff, he's not hanging out with his friends anymore, and so Roxas gets tired of doing these missions, and this happens at the same time that the player would get tired of doing the missions. And this is compounded through stronger Heartless, and less days at the clock tower, and more Heartless bashing missions. And this is something I've always appreciated about Days. I don't know if it was intentional, or it was a dynamic that just spawns from how long the game is, but it's really cool to have this dynamic emerge of both the player and Roxas getting fatigued working in the organization. The Tetris aspect of the panel system starts off frustrating at first, for me, because it's like, oh, well, I need more room for all of my potions because I'm very low level and I keep dying or something. But this becomes less annoying for me as, you know, as you get more panels, because this whole, yes, it's another resource managed system in a way, but you unlock panels naturally throughout the story. It helps with the feeling of you making progress, and sometimes you don't even really need all those 20 potions or whatever, but it's just nice to have them there or something. But that doesn't really go for the backpack system. That is always annoying. So, you know, you're always gonna run out of space for items that you collect, no matter how much you increase your backpack, so that's a little frustrating. As I've said, the magic system is designed for the multiplayer aspect of the game, so the progression of the magic tiers feels a little bit strange for me, and I just end up just taking high-powered tier 1 spells. And while I don't usually talk about the boss designs and the mechanics of bosses that often, I mention it in this game because this game actually has pretty cool boss designs and pretty cool mechanics, like the twin Crimson Pranksters, and you have to take out both of them pretty much at the same time, otherwise they'll heal each other, or Leechgrave's tentacles. But the way the combat works in this game, its simplest form of Kingdom Hearts 1's combat, it makes these boss battles very tedious, and actually a lot of these battles are just kind of like smushed together. So like, I think, let's see, I have a note here. Yes, so Carrier Ghost, Leechgrave, Crimson Prankster, they're all smushed way too close together. Like, the game goes a long time without having a really significant boss fight, and then it slams like 4 at you. And the Ruler of the Sky, it wasn't actually as bad as I remember, but it was the most annoying boss. As I've mentioned, the level design of this game's Cage 2 era. These are mainly wider versions of the Cage 1's levels. Some spatial awareness needed to find out the collectibles for badge missions. But this also like helps with with the synthesis and some of the side quests. So the side quests are kind of cool. So getting all the treasures or defeating all Heartless in a specific amount of missions will result in organization members granting you items and synthesis materials. And what this does is it gives you kind of a sense of accomplishment. You're really doing well working in the organization, or you're helping out a fellow member, or you're doing Demix's work for him. And so you really do get this feel of like you're kind of helping each other out. You're kind of a well-oiled machine, or whatever. But this sense of accomplishment kind of goes away towards the end of the game, when the fatigue that both Roxas and the player feels sets in. So for me in particular, it was like Demix is like, "Hey, Roxas, why don't you take out all these Heartless in these specific missions?" And the missions were all like really hard, and I'm like, "No, Demix, do your own goddamn work." Which is within the game world and game flow, which is pretty cool. So again, as I've mentioned, the further on to the story that we get, the more about the story I'm going to talk about. So, as I said, the main pull of this game is the story, but primarily it's the characters. In my opinion, Days has the best character writing of the entire series. Every conversation with an organization member is full of personality, and you feel like you're part of this really strange family. I want to do it. Like, for example, you've got Syx over here, blue hair, really stoic, X on his face, absolute asshole. You got Zigbar, who's like 1,000,000 years old, has got an eye patch, got a mysterious past, likes to joke around. And then you got Roxas, who is just like he's just a boy who's just trying to live his life and eat ice cream, right? Or you got Demix, who's just, plucking away on his sitar, asking you to continue to do his Heartless collection for him. And it's really cool to have such strong character writing. It really adds life to these characters that unfortunately some future games take away. Like, why why do Lexius and Zelda not talk in Kingdom Hearts 3? What beef does Lexius have with Roxas? But what's also really cool for me is seeing how the worlds of Kingdom Hearts 1 and the characters that we see in Kingdom Hearts 1 fare after the defeat of Ansem in Kingdom Hearts 1. We do see an increase of Heartless, which is worrying to our characters. We see Zaldin begin to take interest in the beast. We see Hercules begin his fatigue. A lot of things that we see as Sora in Kingdom Hearts 2, but we're given more context in Days, which I really appreciate. It's more world building. What's also really cool is the sense of time progression through Kingdom Hearts itself. The moon in the sky. What's really cool is, I wonder, is it I don't think. There we go. So Kingdom Hearts starts out in this game a very small moon, and as you go throughout the game, the moon starts to grow, and this gives time progression. But what's really interesting is that when the stakes begin to ramp up in the game, when we're reintroduced to Riku, when things start to go wrong with Shion, when it's clear that the organization has an ulterior motive to having Roxas and Shion in the organization, and the moon gets bigger, it becomes less like an accomplishment and more of an omen. And that's super, super cool. Now, I say the stakes begin to ramp up, but it takes a little bit. So even when Riku is introduced, the stakes are still fairly low. We still have like a very personal journey with Shion after she encounters Riku. But there's like, when it's clear that Shion is connected to Sora in some way, that's when things begin to feel like they're part of a bigger picture. So the chaos that ensues upon Shion's disappearance and when she returns to the organization, it throws every familiar thing into a very grim perspective. Her very existence is preventing Sora from waking up. And this is now affecting Roxas. We see him having worse dreams. We see him becoming more fatigued. And what this does is that Shion being there, hanging out with Roxas, by extension, is helping the organization by keeping Sora asleep. As I mentioned, Kingdom Hearts becomes this foreboding omen in the sky. And the Sea Salt Trio, they rarely ever meet towards the end of the game. And when it becomes clear that Xemnas intends for Sora to remain asleep, everything starts to feel very desperate. Shion's actions, Shion being such the wild card that she is, it throws both the organization and Ansem the Wise's party into desperate actions. The organization is trying to get Shion back because it means that Sora's going to remain asleep. Riku, as much as he wants to bring Shion back for her to give back the memories to Sora, it means she will disappear. And so the two of them actually travel together for a while, but we see Roxas and Axel become very desperate to find her as well. And what this does, this all builds up in Roxas to the point where he has to find answers and leaves the organization. Now, when I first played this game, I felt like the game focused too much on Shion and not enough on Roxas. And replaying it, I was completely wrong. Because even though there's so much going on with Shion, all of it has an effect on Roxas because it all revolves around Roxas and Sora. Shion is a replica of Roxas. And so everything she does affects him and by extension Sora. And Sora is just so interesting as a plot device in this game. So, because he's asleep for all of this time, and we don't, even though we have Riku there, we have Sora being mentioned and stuff, the first person to actually say Sora's name, like, not within a text bubble, but through actual voice acting, is Xemnas. And that is super impactful. It really, again, just kind of brings things back into this larger picture of, yes, Sora is out there. Sora is getting his memories back. And Roxas unknowingly is being manipulated by Xemnas and the organization to keep Sora asleep, to gain Kingdom Hearts and all these things. And so all of this, when Roxas finally leaves, the last familiar thing in this game, which is the music, that also turns dark. We get the darker version of the World That Never Was theme as we escape the castle and leave our perceived home. Roxas and we the player are leaving everything behind, because even though we the player, we're invested in Sora's awakening, we've also become so invested in Roxas at this point, and the members of the organization, that it really does feel final when we leave. And kicking Saix's ass is always so satisfying. So with Roxas's leaving and Xion about to return her memories to Sora, there's that one final move by Xemnas, that desperate move by Xemnas, where he sends Axel to retrieve Xion. Again, highlighting how important Sora's power is to Xemnas. Xemnas creates there's these devices made that channel Sora's memories into Xion during her boss fight. Sora's face, Xion's face transforms into Sora's, and in that moment, when everything becomes about Sora, and Xion takes off her hood, and she is Sora, it's terrifying, because we're faced with the concept of Sora's power being used for evil. Sora as the villain is a very terrifying concept. And this results in a fantastic 4-stage boss fight with Xion. Her channeling Sora's power, but it's not just Sora's power, because Xion and Roxas, they have fought so hard for their own identities, and Xion has her own weight and power in the world, and her death, it puts Roxas on his path back to the organization to free Kingdom Hearts, to find Sora. But what happens is that it puts him in Riku's path, and what that does is that begins Kingdom Hearts 2. Riku stops Roxas from fulfilling his promise to Xion to free Kingdom Hearts, just so that Sora's memories can return. And getting denied facing the organization as Roxas, it's so interesting, because it then pulls everything back from this large scale back into the small scale. We have to wake up Sora because the organization is desperate to get us, but Roxas has 7 days of summer left. And even though I love Days, the end of Days in Kingdom Hearts 2, I have a lot of thoughts, obviously. So getting denied facing the organization, it really kind of sets up a cliffhanger or the stage or what have you for the real final battle, because we don't get to face it as Roxas, we have to face it as Sora, and Roxas getting pulled into the day to Twilight Town, getting pulled back into this very, very personal journey of trying to find himself, and then facing Sora, facing that decision whether he's actually going to return to Sora or not. And then when he does, and the baton is passed, it really does feel like a new adventure begins, but at the same time, more of a continuation, because we've had this failure to stop not exactly failure, we've had this stopping point from Chain of Memories, and then dealing with the depths of the organization through Days, and then finally getting back to facing them in Sora's story in Kingdom Hearts 2. It's all very impactful, and it's all so slowly paced, but not like snail slow. It is appropriately slowly paced to build up this emotional payoff of losing Roxas and Xion. So, and that is Days. This is taking a lot longer than I thought. So I'll do Cage 2, and then I'll do Coded, and then I'll stop. Alright, Cage 2. So, gameplay mechanics. Wow, sword feels so slow. I don't have Combo Master? I do, but I'm not, okay. Alright, so, gameplay mechanics. So, for Kingdom Hearts 2, it is the original combat where you have the attack, the magic, and the items. There's an additional gameplay mechanic, the drive forms, which I'll get into a little bit. We also have the limits, and we have our summons. So, once again, there's depth added to the gameplay, but it's in a different way than what Birth by Sleep and Calm tried to do, because this is actual depth. So, you have your regular combat. You have your regular combat, your standard combos, your magic. Ow.
This is it.
Ow. Ow. I didn't really want to fight. Alright. Alright, so, you have your standard... Son of a bitch. So you have your standard combat, your just regular, just hit. You have aerial recoveries. But what you also have is these